I decided to show up early at my son's wedding, thinking I would surprise him the way a mother should. But right at the entrance of the hotel, there was a giant sign: VIP entrance, special guests only. When I told the guard I was the groom's mother, he frowned, checked his list, and said, "Ma'am, the groom's mother already went in, through the VIP door." Then he pointed, and I watched another woman, someone I'd never seen, walk in proudly while guests greeted her as Mother of the Groom. In that moment, I realized something was terribly wrong. So I decided to stay quiet and play along. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and tell me the city you're watching from. I never imagined that attending my own son's wedding would uncover a truth dark enough to rewrite everything I thought I knew about being a mother. My name is Marisol Rivera. I am 65 years old and live in a quiet corner of San Antonio, where the smell of roasted corn and the sound of old rancheras still linger in the air every afternoon. My life is wrapped up in a small bakery on the corner of South Flores Street, Panaderia La Esperanza, where I have stood behind the counter for 32 years, kneading dough every morning at 4 and closing at sunset when the scent of cinnamon still clings to the edge of my apron. The bakery is not just a job. It is my second family, the place where I hid from old wounds, the place where I tried to shape hope with my own hands. But if anyone asks what matters most in my life, the answer has always been the same: Mateo. I raised him alone from the time he was 7, when his father decided to walk out of our lives without looking back. Mateo stood in the yard, his dark brown eyes wide open, not understanding why that morning's breakfast was set for only 2. I once thought I would collapse, but when I saw him holding his worn backpack, small under the harsh Texas sunlight, I understood I had only one choice: to stand up and become everything he needed. And I did that in every way a mother can. When Mateo was accepted into college, I looked at the admission letter as if someone had handed me an entirely new and brighter future. But my smile faded when I looked at my savings account. I knew that if I did not find the money, his dream would stop right at the first door. So I sold the only valuable thing in the house: the old Chevrolet I used to deliver bread every morning, the one I had spent 7 years paying off. The buyer paid exactly $11,800. It was not much, but it was enough for Mateo's first semester. I remember clearly how it felt watching the car being driven away, as if a part of my life was leaving that familiar road. But I also remember his radiant smile when I placed the envelope of money on the kitchen table. That smile was worth more than any car. During Mateo's 4 years of college, I sent $750 every month, a total of $36,000. Even though each month meant cutting ingredients, reducing breaks, and making hundreds of extra conchas with my own hands just to make up the difference. Many people asked why I did not keep something for myself. I only smiled. What mother counts pennies with her child? When Mateo called to say he wanted to buy his first apartment, a place big enough to start a new life, I fell silent for a few seconds. I had only a small IRA saved from the years when I was still strong enough to work 12 hours a day. But I did not hesitate. I withdrew $28,400, the money I once thought I would use to rest in old age, and I placed it in his hands as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Mateo hesitated and asked if I was sure. I said, "Son, I did all of this not because I expect you to repay me. I did it because I want your life to be lighter than mine ever was." In my heart, that money was never a sacrifice. It was simply gifts, wrapped in love, tied with dawns spent kneading dough, and given away with the hope that my son would walk farther than anyone in the Rivera family ever had. I did not know that many years later, those gifts would become witnesses to one of the most painful days of my life. But at that moment, all I saw was Mateo, the boy who once clung to my skirt, becoming the man I believed was the best part of my world. The years that followed passed like the mornings in the bakery, steady and peaceful, as if nothing could ever disturb them. Mateo graduated, found a stable job, bought his apartment with the money I had given him, and met Camila, the woman I once thought would become the new light in my son's life. And I, resting in the quiet contentment of a mother who believed she had fulfilled her duty, never imagined that my silent sacrifices would one day turn into wounds. Perhaps every painful story begins with a small sign we refuse to see. For me, that sign was the wedding invitation. Mateo's invitation arrived on an afternoon in August. I remember standing behind the counter, my hands still dusted with sugar crumbs, when the delivery man walked in with a cream-colored envelope. Just a single envelope, so light it felt as though it held nothing important. But when I opened it, my chest tightened. It was not the content. Everything was correct. The names of the bride and groom, the venue, the date, the time. What made my heart fall silent was not what was printed, but what had arrived late. All of my relatives on my side of the family had received their invitations 3 weeks before me. Mateo's friends, too. Even people he had only met a handful of times proudly told me they had received their invitations long ago. And I, the groom's mother, was holding the very last one, as if I had been added as an afterthought. At first, I wanted to believe the mail was delayed, or that they had printed extra and decided to send me another copy. I comforted myself with the pretty excuses any mother clings to, so she does not have to face the feeling of being left out. But that evening, when Lucia, my friend of more than 30 years, stopped by the bakery, one glance at the card shattered every illusion I had been holding onto. Lucia picked up the invitation, turned it slightly, and frowned. "Marcel, why does the groom's mother's card not have the words reserved honor seat? Or at least, as honored guest? The kids up in Austin usually follow that standard." I froze. I had not noticed it before, because I had been too busy being happy for my son. Lucia set the card down gently, as though afraid of hurting me further. Camilla's family's invitations clearly mark the place of honor for the bride's side, but yours has nothing. Marisol, this is not normal. I looked at the card again, this time with eyes no longer shielded by hope. A cold emptiness spread from the lines that felt too quickly printed, too formulaic, too careless. But I still tried to smile at Lucia. Mateo is very busy. They must have made a mistake. My son would never do something like this on purpose. Lucia looked at me for a long moment, then let out a soft sigh. The kind of sigh from someone who understands that some truths cannot be seen until one is ready. That night, when I closed the bakery and walked home, I carried with me a feeling I did not want to name. For more than 10 years, I had spent nearly $80,000 to give my son a better life, paying for his education, his living expenses, his apartment, and all the moments when he faltered. But the feeling of holding that late invitation, it made me ask myself, for the first time in my life, was I the only one who still believed that a mother's love could not be changed? The days after receiving that late invitation, I kept telling myself not to overthink it. Mateo was my son, the little boy who once wrapped his arms around my neck and cried because he had been bullied at school, the man whose entire life I had poured myself into. A late invitation could not change a mother's love. I repeated that to myself like a prayer every morning when I touched the warm trays of bread, and every night when I turned off the lights in the shop. And then the wedding day arrived on a Texas morning so clear and blue. It made people believe bad things only happened in their imagination. I wore the cream dress I had kept folded away for years, tied my hair neatly, and told myself that even if the invitation had arrived late, I would still smile for my son's special day. I drove Lucia's old car to Austin. My heart beat slowly and evenly, as if I were trying to convince myself that everything would be fine, that the moment I saw Mateo, all doubts would dissolve like sugar in hot water. But when I stepped into the grounds of the Circle Grand Hotel, that strange feeling, the one that had started with the invitation, became clearer than ever. The front hall was large and glittering under rows of tall, golden lights. Guests moved in and out in elegant floor-length dresses and expensive suits. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they needed to go. I stood there for a moment, feeling out of place among the luxuries I had never belonged to. Then I saw the large sign set up right at the main entrance, cutting straight into my chest like a knife. VIP entrance, special guests only. Below it was a smaller line. Family and inner circle only. I stopped. There was no entrance marked for family of the groom, no staff member guiding me, only that cold sign dividing the chosen ones from everyone else. I stepped forward, my hand tightening around the small purse. A staff member in a black suit came up and stopped me with a polite but distant smile. "Madam, may I see your VIP pass, please?" I gave him a small smile and kept my voice steady. "Son, I am the groom's mother. I believe I enter through here." He checked the tablet screen, then looked back at me, a bit confused. "I am sorry, ma'am, but your name is not in the VIP system." I thought I had misheard. I asked again, slower, clearer. "Not in the system. I am Marisol Rivera, mother of Mateo Rivera." He shook his head. In the VIP list, the position mother of the groom was checked in at 1:12 p.m. That person already entered through the VIP gate. The air around me felt like it had been drained away. Checked in already. Someone else. Not me. I tried to stand firm, but my legs under the dress began to lose their strength. The staff member continued, "You may wait a moment. If you're not the groom's mother, you might be in the general guest group behind." I could not listen to the rest. A burst of laughter came from the VIP gate. I looked up and saw a group of guests walking in. At the center was a woman around 50, with curled hair and a striking red dress. People around her addressed her with a title that made my heart nearly freeze. "Señora Delgado, this way. Mother of the groom goes first." She smiled brightly, lifted her hand in a small wave, and walked into the hall through the very entrance my son should have held for me. I stood there in the hotel lobby with the late invitation in my purse and a truth blooming slowly and brutally. Somewhere inside that elegant ceremony, another woman was being called by the title that should have belonged to me. I stood, as if nailed to the cold marble floor of the hotel lobby, trying to keep my balance while the world in front of me changed shape little by little. What I had first seen at the VIP gate felt like a simple mistake, until the silhouettes of two people approaching made me understand that none of this was accidental. Camila, in an ivory wedding gown that seemed tailored to her every curve, was smiling radiantly. Beside her was Sergio Delgado, the man I once believed was nothing more than a casual business acquaintance of my future daughter-in-law, wearing a sharp black tuxedo, confidently placing his hand on the back of the fake groom's mother as he guided their group into the VIP area. I watched them like someone standing outside her own life. Sergio tilted his head, smiling politely at the guests. This is the woman who supported Mateo during the hardest years of his life. She deserves the place of honor today. The hardest years. Those words tore me apart. I remembered those hardest years Sergio was referring to. They had not come from anyone else. They had come from me. The year Mateo lost his job at the architecture firm, devastated after being laid off. My son shook as he admitted he had more credit card debt than he could bear to look at. That night, I withdrew from my savings and paid off $6,200 of his debt. I never complained. No one knew, and no one needed to know. That was between a mother and her child. And the year Mateo ended his first marriage, broken, disappointed, convinced he was unworthy of being loved again, I quietly paid $3,100 in legal fees, then sat beside him all night in the new apartment I had helped him secure with the entire IRA I had saved over a lifetime. Those moments did not belong to anyone else. Those were the moments when Mateo had only one anchor left in the world: me. Yet today, under elegant golden lights and the laughter of guests, that credit was being handed to another woman, and not in a private whisper, but in a crowd, with deliberate ceremony. I watched Sergio place his hand around her, leading her in as if she had raised Mateo from the day he was born. People clapped. People congratulated her. They honored her as if she had been the one waking up at 4 every morning to bake bread and still muster a smile for her tired son at the end of the day. They honored her as if she had been the one at Mateo's side when he was defeated, broken, and stripped of confidence. They honored her as if she had been the one slipping every dollar into his pocket, every 20, every savings I had ever scraped together. I felt my hands tremble, not from anger, but from the sensation that someone had lifted my life out of its rightful place and placed it into the hands of a stranger who was smiling as she claimed it. I wondered whether Matteo knew what was happening or whether he had been swept so deeply into that polished world that he had forgotten who stood beside him in the years when he had nothing. From a distance, I watched my son step forward to greet the guests, looking happy, looking grown. But in his eyes, I no longer saw myself. In that moment, I felt something unmistakable. This was not simply my son's wedding. This was a stage someone had built to erase me from the story. And when they disappeared behind the VIP doors, I knew I could not stand there another second. I had to go inside, even if I had to enter through the door they never intended for me. I sat at table 17, trying to keep my breathing steady amid the sweet but hollow laughter echoing through the ballroom. The golden lights reflected off the untouched champagne glass in front of me, the sparkling liquid I refused to lift. It felt like everything else in this celebration. Beautiful, yet distant. Dazzling, yet not meant for me. As I tried to convince myself to stay calm, to wait patiently until the ring exchange so I could at least see Matteo's face up close, soft voices drifted from behind me. Voices of servers stacking trays, words woven through the music, unintentional but impossible to ignore. A young woman whispered, half complaining, half admiring, "Goodness, this wedding is expensive. But I heard most of the money came from Sergio. They wanted it to look really fancy." The server next to her chuckled. "Yeah, fancy for sure. They've got money and I heard Sergio treats the groom like his own son." My hand froze above the table. I was not sure I caught every word clearly, but the meaning struck like a cold needle. Most of the expenses were covered by Sergio. They wanted a luxurious image. He treats the groom like a son. Those phrases twisted in my mind, dragging forward another memory. An afternoon not long ago, when Camila came to my bakery in a neat business outfit, her eyes shimmering as if she were trying to hide something. "Mama Marisol, I'm sorry to bring up money. We're having a little difficulty. I want a simple, cozy wedding. Could you help us? Just for now. We'll pay you back after." She said simple, but the amount she asked for was $12,500. I did not hesitate. I believed I was helping my son. I believed I was giving toward his happiness. I believed I was supporting the two of them as they stepped into the future. But Camila never returned the money. And today, I finally understood why. This wedding was not simple. My son's household was not struggling. My help was not honored. It had all been a financial strategy, a branding project, a stage where they rewrote Matteo's family story and wrote my role as zero. I felt the heaviness in my chest grow, as though the air itself was being compressed until no space remained for breath. With every whisper behind me, it became clear that I was no longer seen as a mother. I was a leftover detail, a debt they had already collected before moving on. I lowered my gaze to my hands, hands that had kneaded dough until the skin cracked, hands that had held Matteo when he was afraid. hands that had done everything to steady his life. Yet now, people spoke of his hard years as if Sergio had been the one to pull him out of the dark. Laughter from the VIP table drifted over like a dull blade dragging through me, and I knew I could not remain there another minute. I needed to stand up. I needed somewhere quiet to breathe. And just as I stepped away, leaving table 17 in behind, I noticed the door to the bride's preparation room slightly ajar, the light inside still on. I had no idea that just a few more steps would lead me to something that would break my heart in an entirely different way. I pushed the bride's room door gently, thinking I only needed a few minutes alone to gather the pieces of myself that had been crumbling inside my chest. But what waited for me in that room was not quiet. It was a truth written in black ink, so stark it felt like it burned my eyes. The room was bright under white LED lights, tidy and bare of anything unnecessary. Camilla's wedding dress hung neatly on a rack, her veil folded carefully on a chair. I stepped in and took a long breath, telling myself I would be fine. Then I saw the planner. A thick, white-bound book, slightly open on the vanity table. I had not intended to touch it, but a draft from the air conditioner lifted the pages just enough to reveal the printed lines in the center, as if it wanted to expose its secret. I walked closer, my heart beating slowly but heavy as stone. When my eyes landed on that line, something inside me collapsed. Remove Marisol from VIP list. Reason: not suitable for image. Not suitable for image. I, the woman who carried Mateo for 9 months, who worked 30 hard years, who paid every tuition bill, every debt, every tear he ever shed, was not suitable for their image. I had to hold the edge of the table to stay upright. I thought that was the deepest cut, but just below it was another note, handwritten in blue ink, in Camila's rounded script. Use Senora Delgado as primary family figure for Mateo. Use Senora Delgado as Mateo's primary family image. That meant that other woman, Sergio's mother, had been chosen to stand in the place that belonged to me. I swallowed a tight lump that felt like gravel stuck in my throat. My eyes drifted downward to a smaller note at the bottom of the page, almost hidden, but infinitely crueler. Memo: Mateo, financially tied to mother, need complete separation. Complete separation. Separate him from me. The numbers I had once held as quiet badges of love. $11,800 from selling my car for his tuition. $36,000 sent over 4 years. $28,400 pulled from my IRA for his first apartment. $6,200 paying his debt. $3,100 for legal fees. $12,500 for this wedding were suddenly twisted into a financial tether they needed to cut off like trimming an unwanted tail. As if my love were a bad loan. As if my sacrifice were a burden. As if I, the only mother he had, were an obstacle to the life they were constructing. I stood there for a long time, my hand gripping the table edge until it whitened, feeling my breath turn into something sharp, scraping the inside of my chest. It was not because I wanted gratitude, not because I wanted honor, but because I had never imagined the day my son would walk into a future built by pushing me out of every doorway. When I turned the page, the rest of the wedding plans blurred, dissolving under tears. But through that blur, one more detail in the corner, penciled faintly, made my entire body go still. Check bank documents before ceremony. Avoid letting Mateo's mother know. A cold line ran down my spine. Clearly, what I had just seen was only the surface of something deeper and darker. And in that moment, I knew I could not stop here. If this planner contained cruelty this blatant, whatever they had tried harder to hide would be far worse. With trembling hands, I set the book back on the table and drew in a slow, steadying breath. I needed to find answers, because sometimes the truth people bury the deepest is the very thing that can shatter a heart forever. I closed the planner, my hands still trembling, as if the words inside had been burned into my skin. Impossible to erase. I stepped back, ready to leave the room and steady myself. But then, my gaze stopped on a black document bag resting casually on the sofa. An elegant one, the kind Camilla often carried when she visited the bakery. It was slightly open, as if someone had hurried to tuck something inside and forgotten to zip it. I was not a curious woman. I had never touched anyone's belongings. But when a mother sees her place in her child's life erased by cold ink and calculated decisions, instinct replaces restraint. I walked toward it. A stack of papers peeked out from the opening. Bank documents I recognized instantly. I gently pulled them free. The first thing I saw was Mateo's name printed in bold at the top right corner. Below it, a detailed statement of his accounts. My eyes scanned the numbers. Then I saw them. $17,500 from account Marisol Rivera to Mateo Rivera. $21,300 from account Marisol Rivera to Mateo Rivera. $13,500 from account Marisol Rivera to Mateo Rivera. Total, $52,300. It was the money I had sent him during his hardest years. Money from late-night batches of bread. Money from winter mornings spent standing for hours in front of a hot oven just to make sure he was all right. Each number was a slice of memory, but the pain did not come from watching the money leave my hands. It came from the small line printed beneath it, sharp as a needle at the bottom of my heart. Transfer to Sergio Delgado business account. I stared at that line for a long time, as if looking long enough might make it fade. But it stayed there, motionless and brutal. Mateo's money. My money. The earnings of my entire life flowing into Sergio's account. It felt as though the air had been pulled from the room. Nothing left to hold on to. No explanation that could make sense. I opened the second set of documents, pages with smudged ink in the corner. Not a financial report, not a contract. Audio evidence. A phone lay at the bottom of the bag, its recording app still open. A file was partially played, as if someone had stopped it in a rush but had not closed it. I pressed play. Camilla's voice came first. Clear, cold, nothing like the soft tone she used when she stood in my bakery. She has contributed too much money already. We need to cut her off. If not, Mateo will keep relying on her. She, her, I, the woman who raised him, fed him, carried him through every failure, reduced to she, spoken like an excessive expense. Then Sergio's voice entered the recording, calm and steady enough to make my skin crawl. After the ceremony, sign the final transfer papers. From then on, all of Mateo's money will go through my company. Separate him from his mother. The sooner, the better. No hesitation, no pause. As if they were discussing an investment strategy, not a human being, and certainly not the groom's own mother. I stood there, my ears ringing, the room spinning around me. Those words ripped away the polished surface of the wedding and revealed a truth I could no longer ignore. This wedding was not built to form a family. It was built to replace one, to replace me, to remove me, to erase me. As I set the phone down, a wave of noise from the ballroom reached the doorway. Voices, footsteps. Then the MC announcing that the ceremony was about to begin. I knew I had to leave the room. I knew I had to witness what came next. No matter how many more pieces my heart might break into. And as I turned to step out of the bride's preparation room, I had no idea that what awaited outside would be even more ruthless than everything I had just read and heard. I stepped out of the bride's room, feeling as if I had walked through a storm whose winds were still twisting in my chest. Everything in the ballroom looked unnaturally bright. White flowers, golden candles, piano music drifting through the air. But to me, it all felt like a stage built to hide the darkness I had just uncovered. Guests had settled into their seats. I returned to table 17, trying to hide my red eyes behind my glasses, trying to find a shred of air in a room that suddenly felt too small to breathe in. Then the MC's voice rose, smooth as velvet. Ladies and gentlemen, please turn your attention to the stage. The bride, Camila Reyes, would like to share a few words before the ring exchange. I lifted my head. Camila stood at the center of the stage, her white gown cascading down the LED-lit steps. The spotlight softened her face, making her look angelic. An angel with a cold voice I had heard minutes earlier on that recording. She held the microphone with both hands, as if preparing to say something sacred. Her voice flowed through the room, gentle but loud enough to fill every corner. Mateo is a man who was raised by the people who stood by him his entire life. The people who supported him, guided him, and loved him unconditionally. I knew who she was about to mention. My heart was still not ready. Camilla turned and extended her hand toward table number 1 at the center of the ballroom. All the guests turned with her. Every gaze landed on the fake mother of the groom, the woman in the bright red dress, sitting straight-backed with her hands clasped as if she were receiving the greatest honor of her life. Camila smiled softly, eyes shimmering. We are grateful to the woman who supported Mateo through the hardest moments of his life. Thank you, Señora Delgado, the spiritual mother of the groom. The applause fell like heavy rain on a tin roof, loud, unforgiving, cold. I felt as if I had just been pushed out of one last door. I lowered my head, my shoulders trembling, not because of the applause, not because the guests did not know who I was, but because my son, the person I loved more than my own life, had allowed his wedding to call another woman by the title I had carried all his life. My tears dropped onto the white napkin, spreading like someone was diluting my memories of Mateo. Memories that now seemed to belong only to me. Through the blur, I lifted my gaze just enough to see Mateo standing beside Camila. His lips were pressed tight, his eyes fixed on the floor. He did not look at me, not a nod, not a glance, not a single sign that he knew my heart was breaking in a way only a child can break a mother's. And just when I thought the pain had reached its bottom, the MC smiled and continued with the next part of the ceremony. The entire room moved at once. People standing, applauding, chairs scraping, glasses clinking. I knew I had to get out. I needed air. If I stayed one more minute, I would collapse at table 17. Then, in the flow of people rising to their feet, I noticed the door leading to the staff preparation area slightly ajar. A faint light inside, the rustle of papers. Something pulled me toward it like an invisible hand. Because sometimes, after one great wound, the world opens another crack. And what I was about to see behind that door would be far more brutal than anything spoken on the stage. I moved through the crowd, avoiding curious eyes and the laughter that felt like it was tearing the air apart. My body seemed to be guiding itself, not because I knew where I needed to go, but because I simply needed to escape table 17 before my chest split open. The door to the staff preparation area was slightly ajar, and I slipped through it, hoping only for a place to wipe my tears. Nothing more. Just a small refuge from the lights and the lies outside. The prep room was tucked behind the scenes, far less luxurious than the ballroom. The bluish fluorescent lights reflected off rows of metal cabinets, giving the space the sterile coldness of a hospital records room. I gently closed the door. No one noticed where I went. No one called after me. No one needed me. I opened the first cabinet, looking for a box of tissues. In the metal surface of the door, my reflection stared back at me through blurred tears. A tired, aging woman trying to hold on to the last thread of dignity. As I reached to close the cabinet, my eyes caught a large board propped against the wall, half hidden behind someone's coat. I froze. I pulled the coat aside, and my entire body went still. On the board was a detailed planning chart, written in bold black marker, divided into sections like a corporate strategy outline. Mateo transfers 40% of assets to Sergio. An arrow pointed toward the next item. Restructure asset sources, expansion capital, sell Mother's Bakery. I stopped breathing. Sell Mother's Bakery. Panaderia La Esperanza, my life's work, listed as an asset to liquidate. The next line stood alone, not connected to any category, but overshadowing them all. Sever mother-child relationship to avoid legal complications. Sever mother-child relationship was underlined twice. The ink still looked fresh, as if written that very morning. I stepped back, and it felt as if the entire room slipped out from under me. They did not just want Mateo to be distanced from me. They wanted every tie, every right, every connection erased so they could transfer assets without needing my signature or involvement. Beside the board was a stack of photocopied sheets clipped neatly inside a plastic folder. As if hypnotized, I opened it. The first page made my heart drop straight to the floor. Power of attorney. Signature at the bottom. Mateo Rivera. Date signed 2 weeks ago. I touched the familiar signature, the signature I first saw on his homework in first grade, the signature I celebrated on his college acceptance letter, the signature I had been proud of when he signed his first job contract. Now that same signature sat below words designed to strip everything away from me. A pain rose in me without sound, a pain without tears. A deep, old kind of pain, like a fault line breaking inside my chest, not because of money or property, but because my son had signed his name to a future that no longer included me. No explanation, no warning, just a signature. Clean, final. I set the papers down, my hands shaking so violently I had to hold on to the cabinet to stay standing. The room spun, but all I could hear was one question. How could they do this to the person who raised Mateo into who he is? Voices from the ballroom drifted in, the music changing, cheers rising, the MC preparing the ring ceremony. They melded into a dull buzzing in my ears, but one name echoed sharply. Mateo, Mateo, Mateo. My son was out there. My son was smiling before the floral arch. My son was stepping into a marriage built on plans he had signed behind my back. Another realization began to form, thin but cutting, like the light under a door. I had to face it. I had no other choice, and everything in this room was only the beginning of a confrontation far larger than anything I had ever imagined. A confrontation I had never prepared for, but could no longer avoid. I left the prep room on footsteps I could no longer feel. What I had just seen was no longer suspicion, no accident, no bitter coincidence. It was a plan, written, arranged, and signed. A plan in which I had been deliberately removed. I followed the hallway leading to the back garden, where the hotel lights fell softly over the pale lavender bushes. The air was cooler there, quieter, and I knew that if I was going to speak to Mateo, to speak honestly and completely, this was the only place where my heart might not shatter out loud. I sent him a short message. Mateo, I need to talk to you. Come to the back garden. Less than a minute later, the door opened. Mateo stepped out. The black suit he wore made him look like a complete man, a groom. But his eyes were not the eyes of the boy who once held my hand while running across a dusty Texas road. They were not the eyes of the child who cried in my arms when he feared the dark. These were the eyes of someone being led, someone holding on to a future he did not realize he was paying for with something far greater than money. Mom, you wanted to see me. I did not speak right away. I opened my bag and took out the planner, the photocopied documents, and the bank statements. I placed everything on the stone bench under the garden lights. Mateo, look. He glanced down at the papers, confused. I saw the confusion climb into his eyes, tightening his lips. He did not deny anything. He did not act surprised. He did not ask, "What is this?" He did not react like a man who knew nothing. He simply stayed silent. I opened the planner to the line that said, "Remove Marisol." Then I pointed to the asset chart, then to the bank transfers, then to the power of attorney with his signature. Mateo, you signed this, didn't you? I heard his throat tighten as he swallowed. Mom, It is not what you think. Then tell me, what am I thinking that is so wrong? That they want to sell my bakery, that they want to cut the relationship between you and me, that you transferred my money to Sergio, or that me, Marisol Rivera, was removed from my own son's wedding because I was not suitable for their image. Mateo turned his face away. The garden light caught his jawline, drawn tight, as if he was struggling with a shame he did not dare to face. Mom, I owe them a lot. I need to live my life. I cannot keep depending on you. I do not want you pulled into all of this. All of this. My voice rose, soft but breaking like a thread pulled too tight. I stepped closer, looking straight at my son, the child I had raised with bare hands and long mornings, with sweat and tears and sacrifices no one else ever saw. Mateo, I have given you more than $100,000 in your life. Every amount, every dollar. Not so you could treat me the way you are treating me today. My tears fell, but they were not the tears of despair. They were the tears of truth surfacing after being buried too long. You say you owe them. Mateo, who do you owe? Do you owe Sergio, a man who pulled you into a trap with dinners and promises? Do you owe Camila, who used the money I gave to her to build her own image? What do you owe them? Tell me, Mateo. I placed my hand over my heart. And me. What do you owe me? Mateo closed his eyes. For a long moment, too long. Finally, he spoke, his voice small, broken, pained. I do not know anymore, Mom. I just want a different life. And that life does not include your mother. He said nothing, and that was enough for me to understand. I turned away and looked up at the darkening Austin sky. The night wind moved through the lavender and carried with it a hollowness so deep I had to steady my legs to remain standing. There was nothing left to say, only the truth. I drew a long breath, wiped my tears, and said my final words. Mateo, I will not hold you back, but I will not let anyone, including you, destroy my life. I gathered all the documents into my bag and zipped it shut. When I turned, Mateo was still standing there, frozen between two halves of his life. One half written for him by others, and the other the space where I once stood, pushed so far away that I could no longer reach him. I walked ahead, and in the sound of the garden wind, I knew that after tonight, his path and mine would never run side by side again. But I also knew that the path I was stepping onto, dark as it was, would lead me somewhere else, somewhere the truth would no longer be hidden. Because what I had discovered tonight was only the beginning of the battle. I now had no choice but to face. I left the garden after that conversation feeling both hollow and awakened. The pain was still there, slow burning and deep, but beneath it, something else had begun to take shape. A cold, steady clarity. The understanding that if I did not stand up to protect myself, no one would do it for me. That night, I did not return to the ballroom. I walked out of the Circle Grand Hotel while the celebration continued behind me. Latin music and rich laughter spilling into the night from people who had no idea a mother's heart was being crushed just outside the glass doors. The truth was, I had nothing left to lose. And that truth made me stronger in a way I never expected. Early the next morning, as the Texas sun was barely rising, I placed the document bag on the wooden desk of attorney Alejandro Cortez, the man who had helped me with my bakery paperwork years ago. He looked at me for a long time, his eyes filled with surprise and anger on my behalf. I slid the materials toward him. The wedding planner. The bank statements show the 520300 I had sent to Mateo. The power of attorney is with his signature. The asset planning board from the prep room, and the audio recording of Camila and Sergio. Alejandro opened each document, and his face darkened with every page. When he finally looked up, his voice was no longer gentle. Marisol, your son used your contributions to transfer funds into Sergio's account. This is a serious violation of family property law, and the plan to cut the mother-child relationship to avoid legal obligations. He pushed the planner back to me. Is evidence of deliberate fraud. I nodded. I already knew that. But hearing it spoken aloud made the pain tighten again inside my chest. Alejandro continued, firm and certain. We have enough evidence to take this to court, and I will also send a report to the Texas Business Commission, where Sergio registered his company. If he received funds from Mateo without proper documentation, he will be investigated. I looked down at my hands that once trembled from hurt, now trembling from something else. Resolve. I do not want to ruin his life, I whispered. Alejandro, I only want the truth to be put in its rightful place. He placed his hand on the desk, his voice warm but unyielding. The truth always has a price, Marisol. But the price Camila and Sergio are asking you to pay is far too high. It is time they pay their share. So that morning, I signed a series of documents. A request for a financial investigation into Sergio Delgado, a notice of family property dispute, a petition to the county court regarding fraudulent conduct. When I finished the last signature, I held the pen tightly, not from anger, but from the realization of something that had been forming in me since the night before. I was no longer the mother bowing her head in the shadows of a wedding that had no place for her. I had stepped into the role of a woman defending her own worth, even if that meant standing against the person she loved most. Alejandro gathered the documents into his black briefcase and stood. I will send everything today. After that, be prepared. The storm is coming, but it will fall on the right people. I nodded, and when I stepped out of the law office, the morning sunlight touched my gray hair, and I knew a new chapter had begun. Not the chapter of someone who endures, but of someone who stands up. What I did not expect was how quickly that storm arrived, because only 2 weeks after I filed the petitions, the world of Camila and Sergio began to crack, piece by piece, like a building raised on sand. I left the days after the filings exactly as I had lived the years before them. I opened the bakery at 4 in the morning. I lined conchas on their trays. I wiped the wooden counters the same way I had for 30 years. My life did not change, but somewhere beyond the bakery walls, their signatures, their plans, their schemes were beginning to collide with reality. And And reality did not take Camilla's side, nor Sergio's. The first news came from Alejandro. Sergio's company was officially under investigation for suspected money laundering. The transfers between him and Mateo, including my money, raised flags at the Texas Business Commission. The contracts Sergio once bragged about were now being examined line by line. The second blow came soon after. The Circle Grand Hotel canceled every contract with Sergio. The stated reason was simple: failure to demonstrate financial transparency. But I knew better. This was the moment the glossy facade started to crack. Camila, accustomed to luxury dinners and the polished businessman image she believed Sergio embodied, suddenly had to face the truth that she had bet her life on a man far from clean. Her social media presence shrank into silence. No more white gown photos, no more pastel brunch spreads. Just disappearance. The grand wedding they built as a symbol of their bright future turned out to be nothing more than a thin coat of paint over a crumbling wall. Mateo and Camila's marriage collapsed in 4 months. 4 months. Barely a blink in a lifetime, but long enough to expose everything. I did not ask Mateo about it. I did not reach out. But on a gray, rainy afternoon, as I was sliding empanadas into the oven, the bakery door opened. Mateo stood there, raincoat dripping, his posture that of a boy who had shattered something he never meant to break. "Mom?" His voice was hoarse, barely audible over the rain on the awning. I was wrong. I was fooled. I thought they wanted the best for me. I didn't know how bad it all was. Mom, can you forgive me?" I looked at my son. No longer the groom in a black suit. No longer the man who tried to cut himself free of me for the sake of illusions. But the boy he once was, standing at my bakery door with wet eyes, waiting to be held. I wiped my hands on my apron, stepped toward him, and placed my hand on his shoulder. "Mateo, I am still your mother. I forgive you." I said it without hesitation, because a mother's love is not measured by a child's perfection, but by the ability to still love them when the heart has been bruised. But I did not lie to him. I met his eyes, my voice soft but steady, the voice of a woman once erased from her own child's story who had learned to stand upright again. "I forgive you, but I will not return to the place they tried to erase me from. I will not sit at a table where I was never meant to be." Mateo cried, really cried, for the first time since he was a child. Not because I rejected him, but because he understood that some things, no matter how deep the regret, can never return to what they once were. I held him, but my embrace was no longer a refuge for him to collapse into. Not anymore. Today, that embrace was to place a period, gentle but final. After he left, I stood before the oven, watching the dough rise under the heat, feeling as if I too was being reshaped into something new. Someone not destroyed by heartbreak, but deepened by it. And on that rainy afternoon, I understood that my life was stepping into a new chapter, a chapter not defined by the weight of what I lost, but by the rebirth of what remained within me. The months that followed passed quietly, without drama or noise. But to me, They felt like the early mornings when the bakery first opened, everything still and calm, yet carrying a new breath in the air, the feeling of beginning again. The story of Mateo's wedding and everything that surfaced afterwards spread through the community naturally, not because I told it, but because what Camila and Sergio had done was too big to hide. People in the neighborhood began to understand. Marisol, the quiet woman who had sold bread for more than 30 years, had lived through something no mother should ever have to endure. They came to the bakery more often. They bought more bread. Some walked in just to take my hand and say, "You are not alone, Marisol. The whole community stands with you." Not pity, respect. Respect for a mother who gave her entire life, then stood up again after the deepest betrayal. The bakery's revenue nearly doubled, not because I changed anything, but because people were moved by the pain of the mother who once sat silently at table 17, and they wanted to help her rise. Mateo returned too, not loudly, not trying to reclaim anything, but like someone learning to walk again after a hard fall. He moved into a smaller apartment, found a new job, and learned to manage a life that no one else would carry for him. We spoke again, but not as before. I listened to him talk about what he was trying to repair, the mistakes he was paying for. I smiled, reminded him to eat well, to take care of himself. But the distance remained, not out of anger, but because some cracks stay like fractures on an old porcelain plate. You can mend it, but it will never be exactly the same. One afternoon, as Mateo sat quietly in the corner of the bakery, I placed a concha on the table in front of him and said softly, "Mateo, my love for you is real, but trust, once broken by the very child a mother raised with every dollar she had, does not heal easily. No blame, no accusation, just the truth. The truth of a mother who had given everything and had been traded away for the sweet promises of strangers." Mateo bowed his head, tears falling onto the old wooden table. I did not pull him into my arms like before. I only placed my hand over his, soft but steady, as if to say that no matter what, my door was still open. But the door of my heart needed time to close and open again in a different way. And I, Marisol Rivera, the woman who had once been erased from her own son's wedding, finally understood. Healing is not about reclaiming your old place. Healing is stepping into a new chapter where you no longer need anyone's approval to know your own worth. I kept baking every day. Panaderia La Esperanza once again smelled of fresh dough, cinnamon sugar, and a life continuing in the kindest way it knew how. I no longer waited for Mateo to love me the way he did as a child. I only waited for him to learn how to love well. And that, far more than his return, was the real gift for a mother. One evening, standing at the bakery door as the sun set over South Flores Street, I told myself, the greatest thing a mother can give her child is not money or opportunity. It is the final lesson. No one has the right to erase your worth, not even the person you love most. And in that sunset, I knew I had become myself again, strong, calm, and no longer afraid of being erased from anyone's story. And you? What would you do if you were in this person's shoes? I would love to hear your opinion, so please share it with me in the comments. I am always curious about your thoughts, and don't forget to write to me and tell me where you heard this story. For more life stories like this, like the video and subscribe to my channel. There are many more stories waiting for you.